bit more than a week since the Commission adopted the strategy on the Western Balkan, which clearly sets out the European perspective for the whole of the Western Balkan, including, of course, Kosovo, and which also, in some detail, is clear that could be, in some detail, sets out also what needs to be done in order for Kosovo to move forward on that path. And that has to do with issues relating to the issue of rule of law, that has to do with issues relating to the economy, and that has also to do with issues relating to reconciliation. And the strategy does also set out, finally, what we from the EU side shall do and will do in order to support Kosovo in these efforts. So this was the background to today's discussion, and we had a very good discussion on these issues, the reform efforts that are underway here in Kosovo. And I would like to commend you, Prime Minister, and the government for the measures and the steps you have taken when it comes to moving that reform agenda forward. But I think it's also important to recognize that these reforms are difficult. When we talk about changing the judiciary, when we talk about taking measures, more measures against corruption, or for that sake, when it comes to issues relating to the public administrative reform, to take 3 examples. And I think one issue that we discussed today is that it is something, one thing is that the government takes the measures and move forward, but it's also going to be very important that the Parliament and the opposition comes in and sees the opportunity that is there now for Kosovo to move forward. And of course, in that context, also civil society is essential. And for our part, we will continue to work very closely with the government and with the various institutions here in Kosovo in order to drive this agenda forward. And if you allow me, Prime Minister, I hand the floor over to Thomas Weidhaupt.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you, Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, just very briefly, first of all, let me underline that this strategy, as Director General Danielson has said, is addressed to the entire region. And this is essential. It describes the future European path of everyone in the region, including Kosovo. And that was a very important message for all of us. And the second point I'd like to make is linked to the central role that reconciliation plays in this context. Nobody can progress on his European path if there is not full reconciliation. And in the specific case of the relations between Belgrade and Pristina, Serbia and Kosovo, the strategy is very clear in saying that there can be no final progress also of Serbia if there is not irreversible implementation of a legally binding agreement that leads to full normalization, and that this is also implemented. I think this is a very important message. So if one progresses, this will create an overall atmosphere which makes progress more important for everyone, and beyond that will transform the situation in the entire region. And I think that's very important to understand this here as well.
Thank you. Minister, është frontrunner për Kosovë.
Vetëm lejoni të theksoj se ne si qeveri jemi të përkushtuar që të intensifikojmë punën për të ndërmarrë reformat e nevojshme për implementimin e agjendës evropiane të reformave dhe MSO-s, e cila MSO-ja, pra plani i punës së MSO-s është edhe pjesë përbërëse e planit punës së qeverisë dhe kemi përkushtimin për implementimin e saj. Tashmë kemi dinamizuar procesin dhe kemi shumë koordinim të mirë përkraje edhe nga Kryeministri personalisht për të shtyrë këto procese përpara dhe kemi parë një progres të vazhdueshëm dhe gjithashtu jemi duke punuar edhe ngushtë edhe me Kuvendin e Republikës së Kosovës, se kemi vazhduar këtë edhe në takim, sepse shumë edhe prej reformave kërkojnë edhe miratimin e legjislacionit, ligjeve në Kuvend. Dhe gjithashtu jemi dakorduar edhe me Kryeministrin që të kemi një qasje të përbashkët saj përket procesit të integrimit dhe të vazhdojmë me konsensusin e brendshëm i cili vazhdimisht ka mbretëruar në Kosovë, konsensusin nacional tonin për integrimin evropian.
Ridita, Besnik Tahiri, Kosova. Mr. Danielson, the first question goes to you. The strategy of EU, it says that Kosovo and Serbia, or as you say, Pristina and Belgrade, has to have a final agreement, urgently, legally binding agreement. Does it mean that in the end of this process, Serbia and Kosovo has to recognize each other as independent states? And the second question goes to Mr. Harting. We do have the Prime Minister of Montenegro today visiting Kosovo. And the two Prime Ministers, if the two Prime Ministers, Mr. Haradinaj and Mr. Duško Marković, are going to have a deal for reconsidering the demarcation deal, is the European Union going to accept that and move the condition about the visa liberalization? Find it.
Thank you very much. I think we will reply in the reversed order of what you suggested, if you don't mind. On the issue of the visa, which I will take, we want to see the issue solved, and that is something that it's between Kosovo and Montenegro, and that is what is on the table. Once it has been solved, it is ticked off on the list when it comes to the visa liberalization. It's in the hands of the parties to move forward on it, and we are happy and will be very happy once such a solution has been found that both of them can be happy.
Well, on the other issue, as I said, the point is legally binding, irreversible, full normalization between Serbia and Kosovo. The High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Mrs. Mogherini, is facilitating this process, and I think it's very important that the European Union is facilitating this process. The solution will be found between the parties under her facilitation, and it's very good that we are now getting into the next stage. I mean, we were implementing technical agreements, hopefully, that were already reached, but we're now getting into the next stage where I think everybody is willing to speak about the essential path that leads to full normalization. I think it's a little premature to exactly say right now where this will take us, but the engagement is important, and it requires statesmanship on all sides. I think we very much appreciate the political engagement that has been taken by President Thaci, that the engagement of the Prime Minister, whose personal advisor is also at the same time the chief negotiator for this process. All of this, I think, is very important, and we have to see where this takes us. The European Union believes in ownership in these processes. It's important that the partners come forward with an agreement that can be facilitated by the European Union.
Artur Mulliqi nga Radio Televizioni i Kosovës. Unë kam dy pyetje për mysafirët nga Bashkimi Evropian, zotëri Kryeministri Haradinaj. Ditë e ngjeshur me shumë vizita sot në Kosovë, pikërisht në prag të pavarësisë, në vizita juaj realizohet po ashtu në ditën kur në Kosovë, siç tha dhe kolegu vije kryeministri Maltëzi, i cili me siguri që temë qendrore të takimeve do ta ketë demarkacionin, si problemi që po na merr më së shumti kohë. Më intereson ta di, pasi që në Kosovë vazhdimisht po flitet për demarkacionin dhe votimin e tij. BE-ja po përmend në vazhdimsi edhe një kusht tjetër, që është luftimi i korrupsionit dhe krimit të organizuar për të arritur deri tek liberalizimi i vizave. Në fakt, nëse votojmë demarkacionin po e zëm brenda javës ose edhe pak më vonë, a na mbetet edhe kushti tjetër, apo do të kemi viza shumë shpejt, liberalizim vizave shumë shpejt, sepse kjo është shumë e rëndësishme për qytetarët e Kosovës që ta kenë një përgjigje të qartë, ndërsa pyetja tjetër është sa i përket dialogut me Serbinë, është zëvendës kryeministri i Kosovës Enver Hoxha ai që ka thënë se nëse nuk kemi liberalizim të vizave, vazhdimi i dialogut nuk do të kishte kuptim fare. A se komentoni në fakt një gjë të tillë, a shihni ju si kusht të Kosovës për dialogun këtë?
On the visa liberalization, 95, I think the numbers of conditions were in order for you to come to the point where the Commission would propose to the member states that Kosovo should get visa liberalization. Kosovo has done a great job. 93 of those 95 conditions are met. There are 2 outstanding. One has to do with the delimitation of the border with Montenegro, and the other has to do with the fight against corruption, where lots of progress on the latter has been made. We are following that very closely. And so the reply to your question is that when all these 2 conditions are met, then we are going to go forward. But I cannot today say when that is the case, simply because we are still looking into both these conditions as they stand today. Should I? Yeah, please.
Should I respond?
Yeah, please take the other one.
Well, just it is not for me, I think, to comment on statements that were made or not made. I'm not aware of them in all detail within Kosovo. I think that
individë përmendoj që të gjitha këto çështje janë shumë të rëndësishme për fushën e vet. Liberalizimi i vizave është shumë e rëndësishëm dhe Kosova duhet të punojë në këtë fushë dhe është në interesin e Kosovës dhe e komisaruar se dialogu është pjesë e rëndësishme e zgjidhjes për të rajonin. Faleminderit. Faleminderit.
There we are.